Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of PowerCore Productions and Podcastings. I'm your host, Javon Harrington, back to hit you with another video. And today, we are looking to continue and conclude Part 5 of Jujutsu Kaisen Curse of Daishi, based on the heroes of the Morphing Grid series. First and foremost, as always, if you're a fan of the channel and everything else that we have to offer, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is PowerCore Productions and Podcasting that is to come out now and in the future. So with this part 5, we're going to be ending things here mainly because we are about to get into the major crossover event. Now, like I've said with a lot of series, I've left it open ambiguously, mainly because for some of you guys, you may want me to come back to this series after the crossover event. For others, you might just be happy with the crossover event itself and you might not want any more. Anyway, I'm just leaving room open so that I can come back to this series if I want to. The main reason for that is because at the current recording of this video, Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2 most likely isn't going to be coming out until 2023. Now, I've actually read ahead in the manga. I've actually read the Shibuya arc as we're getting into the Culling Game arc at the moment. So, I already know what happens in the Shibuya arc, but there are those who do not, and I don't want to spoil that for them. So, at the very latest, I wouldn't be able to continue this series until next year, and that's assuming Jujutsu Kaisen comes out during the spring or summertime, not into the fall or the winter of 2023. Otherwise, it could be up to a full year before I come back to this series. So because of that, I'm going to be leaving things off here since it's basically going to be the ending of Season 1 anyway. Now, I am foregoing the last arc of Season 1 that would have ended up being Part 6, mainly because I really didn't want to try to drag this out any longer than it needed to be, but that's just me personally. Now, of course, I can always come back to it if you want, but that's just something that we'll just have to see in the future. Whether or not I do the Jujutsu Kaisen 0 movie, that's something that I'll just have to wait and think about going into the future, although I do hope you understand my decision making going forward. But anyway, without further ado, we are going to be getting into today's video as we wrap up this series. So as always, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Following his battle with Mahito, Gojo would look to reunite Yuji with the other Tokyo students, as the goodwill event between the two schools from both Kyoto and Tokyo was going to take place. A competition between young Jujutsu sorcerers. But for this year, there was going to be an added twist to that. For one, this was going to be the first time that two ranger teams were going to be put against one another. Now, the ranger system was fairly new for the many new schools that had come along the way. It was something that Gojo had made a little over 3 years ago, and this would be the first time that both sides would get a chance to test out their abilities against one another. While the Tokyo school used the Jungle Fury power, the Kyoto school used the Wild Force, both similar in the fact that they used the power of not only Jujutsu sorcery, but also the power of the animal spirits. However, the difference between them was how they chose to express that power. For the Wild Force team, they harnessed the power of the animal spirit, keeping it within, while for Jungle Fury, its power focused on unleashing the beast. Both sides would have teams of 6 rangers. On the Kyoto side, they would have Noritoshi Kamo, who would be the red Wild Force Ranger, with the spirit of a lion. They would have Ao Todo, who would be the black Wild Force Ranger, with the spirit of the bison. They would have Mai Zenin, who would be the white Wild Force Ranger, with the animal spirit of the white tiger. They would have Kasumi Miwa, who would have the spirit of the wolf, a way of looking up to one of her idols, that being Satoru Gojo, who also had the wolf spirit. There would be Momo Nishimiya, who would have the spirit of the eagle. And finally, there would be Mekamaru, who would be the blue Wild Force Ranger with the spirit of the shark. As both schools had now gotten a chance to see one another, the principal of the Kyoto school, Yoshinobu Gakujima, would be enraged to see that the vessel of Sukuna was still alive. It seemed as though ever since this Yuji had come along, matters had only gone from bad to worse. There was still this Jinpai kid, who had now become the vessel for Daishi, and now it seemed as though the Beast Army was starting to reform. They were dealing with Renshin guards who were coming out of the woodworks. For both sides, they had to stay busy at all times, fighting against them as well as other monstrous beasts, from those of the animal kingdom to those of the cursed spirits. It was like fighting a war on 2 fronts, although in all actuality, it was a 3-way battle. It wasn't uncommon for those of the animal beast to fight against other cursed spirits as well, or for a Jujutsu sorcerer to fight against a cursed spirit, only for an animal spirit to want to get in on the action. 3-way battles were now becoming all the rage these days. So much of a headache. And at the center of it all were the 2 vessels. For those of the higher-ups, they believed that killing them would be the best way to resolve the issue. That was why Yoshinobu would implore with his students to kill Yuji, believing now that they would follow out the orders given to destroy the vessel before it could become too powerful. As for Yuji, he would get a chance to meet with the other members who were a part of his team, that being in Panda, Mai, and the new kid who couldn't actually talk. What was his name? Toge, he believed, although in the end, Yuji couldn't really make out what he was saying all that much, mainly because he had limited speech due to his curse technique. Although he did learn that these 3 were also rangers as well, with Toge having the shark spirit also, Mai having the spirit of the bat, and Panda having the spirit of the elephant. With both sides now coming up with their strategies, the first event of the day would be announced. It was going to be a team battle. Both teams would go inside of a forest area, where they would have to try to capture and battle against various cursed spirits that had been released, gaining different points based on the number of curses that they caught. They could also fight each other as well, although Gojo did implore for them to not take things too far. However, knowing what was going to happen today, that wouldn't really be the case. As both sides started from opposite directions, they would make their way into the forest immediately, both sides rangering up and morphing into action, as the 2 group of rangers would follow deeper within the labyrinth of the forest itself. Of course, they had already had a strategy planned out before Yuji had gotten involved, but now that he was here, it would actually make things a lot easier for them. Mai would instead change the plan for Yuji to serve as the decoy to fight against Todo, as he was going to be the major powerhouse of the Kyoto school. Yuji, the Red Jungle Fury Ranger, would come face to face with the Black Bison, Todo himself. As everyone would split away, leaving it to him, the spirit of the tiger, as well as the spirit of the bison, would now come face to face. Todo would be intrigued by Yuji and his power, especially by using his own cursed technique, that being the delayed fist. Yuji would implore using the spirit of the tiger, using it to amplify his punching strength. When mixed with cursed energy, he could delay the effect of the attack, causing an aftershock from a hit that he already produced. In doing so, the two would begin their battle, Todo now fighting someone whom he believed was actually capable of going blow for blow with him. In the midst of their combat though, Yuji would actually use a technique that he wouldn't know would actually be unbeknownst to him at the time. It all started when Todo asked Yuji a simple question, that being what his type of woman was. Well, Yuji wasn't really expecting this kind of question, but all the same, there was no reason for him not to answer. He thought about it, and he realized the kind of girl he liked was someone who was tall with a fat ass. In doing this, it caused Todo to generate a false memory between himself and Yuji, of the two of them being best friends in middle school, growing up in the same town, and sharing the same experiences together. In one fell swoop, Todo had now come to see Yuji as a brother in arms, as an ally. Although their time for bromance would be short-lived, as the other Wild Force Rangers would arrive instantly, each one attempting to take off Yuji's head. Fighting against multiple Rangers at once was not easy, to say the least, each one having their own unique abilities, making them difficult to combat. They were actually doing a pretty good job, and Yuji felt for one moment that they might actually end up killing him. However, before they could get a chance to do so, Yuji would find himself being saved by Todo, who would refute his other friends for getting involved, as this was a battle between he and Yuji alone. The others, seeing this, would realize now that the only thing they could do was carry on with the game. However, they would leave Yuji to Todo. This would lead to other battles splintering off. Mai coming into contact with her sister, the two Zenin twins now coming face to face, the spirit of the bat and the spirit of the white tiger. Two contradicting animal spirits, to say the least. In the meantime, Panda would go one-on-one against Mechamaru. Mechamaru, having the spirit of the shark, was not too uncommon. The power of water was one of a cooling sensation, one that Mechamaru had to take advantage of given his current predicament. You see, Mechamaru was being controlled remotely. The person who was actually using the Mechamaru body was in another location. He had been born with birth defects, and as a result, he couldn't actually move all that well. His skin was so brittle, as well as his bones. It took everything from him just to be able to exist. However, the cursed energy that he got from it was truly astounding. For him, the spirit of the shark was a natural one that he would want, mainly because the freedom of the sea was something that he longed for. It was one of the reasons why he hated something like Panda, mainly because Panda was created using the Cursed Corpse technique, and in the end, he didn't view Panda as anything real, nothing with substance. In his eyes, he was nothing more but a doll. But for Panda, he didn't see things that way. Of course, he wasn't human, nor could he say that he fully understood humans all that well, But in the end of the day, that was something that he wanted to have in his life. His emotions were no more invalid than anyone else's, and he didn't let himself be affected by the trivial. As the two of them fought, Panda would show off his various strengths. You see, for Panda, he was built to have more than just one core within himself. There was his primary core, the Panda core, but there were also the core of the other beings within him, who he considered to be his brother and sister respectively. There was the Gorilla core. They gave him a special gorilla mode that allowed him to beef up his size, while also being enhanced by the power of the Elephant core that was the source of his jungle fury spirit. In the meanwhile, Nobara would be in battle against Momo, the two Yellow Rangers, each one with a different element in nature, the spirit of the cheetah and the spirit of the eagle. There was also Fushiguro, the jaguar, as he did battle against the Red Lion, Noritoshi Kamo. The battle between the powers of the Zenin and the Kamo's families. It seemed as though the fighting were going to be hectic on all fronts, and there was no clear telling of which side was going to win. However, in the midst of the exams themselves, the enemy was at work, at least on the side of the cursed spirits. There had been a plan that had been set into motion, and they were going to use this time to serve as a distraction for their primary goal. Hanami, a cursed spirit that took its powers from that of the planet Earth itself, having one arm wrapped in bandages, and having branches that sprouted from where its eyes should be, would make its way, attacking the others as they did battle. It would force the Rangers to briefly have to put their differences aside for the sake of the fight. Fushiguro, as well as Kamo, along with Toge, the three of them would have to stop in the midst of combat, as Hanami would appear, the cursed spirit being able to use the roots of the very trees around them, changing the terrain and causing them to be attacked from all fronts. Giant spiked roots would come flying in towards them. Toge, along with Fushiguro, would both use their respective animal spirits to attempt to block off the giant roots, allowing just enough time for Kame to use his own technique, using his blood along with the enhanced spirit of the lion itself. He was able to launch an attack that was able to cut the roots down to size, hoping that they would have a chance to strike the cursed grade while they were at it. However, the curse that they were battling was not one that they could take lightly, for it was in fact a special grade, one that would not be defeated as easily as they were hoping for it to be. In the meanwhile, Satoru, along with the other teachers and staff, realizing now that they were under attack, would make their move to go and rescue the students from danger. However, as they arrived, a large curtain-like veil would appear over the area. Gojo would morph into the Wolf Ranger, attempting to pass through. However, he unfortunately could not. The veil was made specifically to keep only him out. With no choice, Gun Kanji, as well as Lori, would have to go inside ahead of him to rescue the students. Gojo in the meanwhile would stay on the outside. Hopefully, if the veil could be brought down quick enough, then he could make his way in and finish off the enemy. In the meantime, Hanami, the special grade curse, was starting to become more than what the students could have prepared for. A special grade was not something to be taken lightly by anyone, not even by someone with ranger powers. One special grade could wipe out an entire city. That was just how dangerous they truly were. Maki and Fushiguro would have no choice but to fight it themselves. For Maki, she had specially made cursed tools that she fought with. As the spirit of the bat, her signature weapon were that of the double fans, although she did have a pair of nunchakas that she could spare to use in the fight. The two would do their best to fight against the special grade, actually being able to do some damage. However, Hanami would be too powerful, using a technique of its own, cursed buds, that attached themselves to both Maki and Fushiguro, causing these large buds to start growing from out of their various stomachs and other portions of their body that they had been touched by. Their power was starting to fade away fast, and before long, they had actually demorphed. It looked like it was going to be the end for them, until a flash of red and a flash of black would appear instantly. Both Yuji and Todo would have arrived in time, saving their friends from the special grade. Panda would have arrived as well, being notified to get to the safety. Both Todo and Yuji would stay back to do battle against the special grade curse, the red Jungle Fury Ranger and the black Wild Force Ranger. However, Todo wasn't going to get involved at first, as he stood and sat to the side. You see, from the brief moments that both he and Yuji had fought with one another, he was able to see a flaw in Yuji's fighting style. Believing that they had rectified it, he wanted to see proof for himself. If Yuji couldn't show that he had improved, Todo wasn't going to help, and Yuji was just going to be left to die right then and there. Yuji would step up first, as he fought against Hanami. He remembered this special grade from the last time they had seen one another. Yuji had felt powerless. He couldn't do anything against it. However, now, things were different. Yuji had improved greatly in his abilities to use not only cursed energy, but in his abilities to unleash the tiger spirit. As the two fought, Aoi would watch as Yuji would attempt to use the Black Flash. The Black Flash was a special high, if you will. It was a specific condition, a moment in which the power of a Jujutsu sorcerer would be perfectly aligned. It would be in sync, being able to unleash a devastating force of power. It would allow the user to amplify their strength physically with cursed energy, applying it within 1/1,000,000th of a second, thus the phrase a Black Flash. Of course, though, to use the Black Flash was incredibly rare, something that not many could do. Even the best could only do it for a certain number of times in their overall lifespan. However, for Yuji, he seemed natural at it, almost like he was becoming perfectly in sync. Using the delayed fist, while it was a crucial technique to have, delaying the power between the strike and between the delivery of the force made it difficult to use a Black Flash in Yuji's case. While Yuji fought off-tempo, the Black Flash required perfect synchronization. Once seeing that Yuji was able to use the Black Flash successfully, Todo would get involved, and the two of them would fight together, the both of them being able to land crucial strikes against Hanami. eventually forcing the cursed spirit to have to unsheathe its other arm, an arm that was entirely black with a flower on its shoulder. You see, this cursed spirit was different from most others. It was actually capable of drawing in nature energy and turning it into cursed energy, putting it on a level much different than many other special grades. This curse came into existence due to the pollution and due to the destabilization of Earth's ecosystem. This curse had come to develop a hatred for humans. The only way in its mind that it could save the planet, that it could possibly heal the Earth, was to eliminate all humans from the Earth. Personally, Hanami had no issues with the animal spirits, since the animal spirits could naturally coexist with nature. The only reason they fought was because there were two opposing forces, and in the end, only one force could be left to reign supreme. In the midst of their fighting, Hanami had become used to the movements of Yuji and Todo, believing now that it had the upper hand in knowing where they were going to strike. However, what happened next would be a movement that would catch them off guard. Todo would use his own curse technique, something that he called the boogie woogie. By simply clapping his hands, it would allow him to switch places with anyone. Doing so, Todo's combination of the boogie woogie, along with Yuji's ability to land the Black Flash more consecutively, allowed them to create various openings against the cursed spirit. It was able to throw it off in midst of creating a strategy, as even when it was able to adapt, Todo revealed that just because he clapped his hands, it didn't mean that he was actually using the technique. Hanami was now starting to become more and more frustrated, but at the same time, it was experiencing something that it never thought it would before. The cursed spirit was enjoying the combat. It was enjoying the fight. These rangers, they were truly something else. From what Hanami had learned from Mahito, to fight against a ranger, it was like fighting against something that was on another level, something beyond that of a regular Jujutsu sorcerer. It was like fighting against something that you knew could take your life. It pushed you to get better. It forced you to adapt, or it would force you to die. One way or another, you felt the most alive you could possibly feel on a battlefield itself. In the midst of battle, Hanami would be forced to activate his own domain expansion. In the midst of doing so, the curtain, the veil that had been placed over the battlefield would be dispelled, and Gojo would rush quickly. He looked around the surveying area, looking to see where he should make his first move. First, he wanted to bust old man Gankuganji's balls a bit. He arrived while the old hermit was battling against a being known as Juzo. Juzo being a rather deranged individual who mainly wanted to turn Satoru Gojo into a coat rack with his own bones. Of course, no one could fully understand this, not even his own allies, but Gojo paid this little attention, being able to easily destroy the would-be attacker's arms and legs, leaving him nothing more but stubs as he fell to the ground. Leaving him to be attended to, Gojo would once again use his senses, looking around the battlefield to see who was the next highest threat. Getting the presence of Hanami, Gojo would unleash his most powerful of techniques, the Hollow Technique Purple, using a powerful force to obliterate the area where the cursed spirit was. Before Yuji or Todo could even move, they could feel the energy signaling off of Gojo. The two of them staying in place and not moving at all, as a large beam of violet purple would create a massive crater that spanned a good distance. The effort of the force was so dense that they weren't able to tell if the cursed spirit had been killed or not. Unknown to them, Hanami had survived, but barely, making it back to the rendezvous point where Mahito was able to save his comrade, now having successfully stolen what they had come for: 6 of Sukuna's fingers, as well as the death painting wounds, numbers 1 through 3. They had now gotten what they had been looking for, so it was easy enough for them to disappear in the midst of the chaos. The casualties were great. There were many other teachers and staff and guards who had unfortunately been killed in the incident. As the students were recovering, they had learned a lot about one another. They were unsure of what to do now. However, Todo was not in favor of canceling the event. After all, they didn't lose anyone personally in the attacks, so they had no right to sit around and grieve. Gojo liked this attitude and spirit, and now it was time to move on to the second day's event. Of course, no one fully knew what they were going to be doing. They thought that they were going to be engaging in some sort of one-on-one combat tournament, but Gojo just laughed, explaining that this wasn't some shonen anime battle manga or anything along those lines. What did they think? They were just going to have some type of one-on-one tournament where they beat each other to near death, fighting for some fake supremacy? Come on, who does that? No, they were going to be having a good old-fashioned baseball game. Of course, both sides were pretty fine with these results, mainly because after all the fighting that they had done, they weren't really looking to be doing anymore. And baseball, that could be just as competitive to an extent. Of course, both sides were still looking to give it their all, as neither school wanted to lose. However, there was one moment where everyone came together, that being when Todo was up to bat. Todo and Yuji, their brotherhood had gotten a lot deeper. Yuji wouldn't fully know if they were friends or not, since he felt as though they had become friends under duress, but for Todo, he felt like he had found his brother, someone whom he could feel came out of the same womb as him. However, while he was distracted, Mai would sock him in the face. He got hit with a baseball, and he was knocked out cold on the ground. And everyone from both sides would simply say, "Nice pitch." It was at that moment that Yuji realized that his good old friend Todo was indeed hated by everyone. Ultimately, after 9 innings, the Tokyo school would win by a score of 1-2. And even a few of the principals and the higher-ups, for everything that they had experienced, they felt as though things might not be all that bad. After all, they still, while they had their misgivings about Yuji being the vessel for Sukuna, he was still a student and someone that they should watch out for. However, Satoru Gojo was a different story. With the event now over, it seemed as though the two schools were going to be going their separate ways. Life was now going to be returning back to normal. At least, as normal could be for these type of situations. In the lives that they lived, nothing was ever truly normal. But something extraordinary was about to happen. It all began on a regular day. Yuji was walking about on the campus. He was preparing to meet up with Megumi and Nobara and Gojo. As he was about to do so, he would look off into the distance. Looking over to the vending machines, he could see that Maki, Panda, and Toge were also there. He had gone over to say hello, and it seemed as though everyone had arrived at the same time. However, the moment they had all done so, Yuji felt something. He felt something in his chest. He wasn't entirely sure why he felt this. He wasn't even able to fully comprehend how this feeling was coming about. But he felt as though he were experiencing great loss. Like there was a family member in trouble. He felt as though he had a brother, but he didn't have a brother. Yuji was an only child, he knew this. But yet, why was this feeling overwhelming him right now? He wasn't entirely sure, and he couldn't fully explain it. That was until a portal opened before them. There was the sound of battle and combat from the other side. Everyone was shocked. No one knew what was happening. No one could even explain what was happening, how on earth this portal had opened and where it had come from, and why they all had this strange urge to jump through it. The feeling washed over Yuji to the point where he could no longer ignore it, and without any hesitation, he jumped in. Gojo was shocked to say the least. Both Nobara and Megumi were extremely confused, as their friend had just seemingly disappeared to who knows where. However, Gojo felt as though he understood. He had a weird way of just knowing these things. Without any hesitation, he encouraged all of the students to go. Of course, they all looked at him like he was crazy, but Gojo explained that there was destiny behind that portal. Plus, if they didn't go, Yuji might do something stupid, so he was going to need all the help he could get. Fushiguro simply shook his head. His master was up to something, he just didn't know what it was. So, reluctantly, Megumi, as well as Nobara, would make their way through the portal also. Maki, Panda, and Toge would follow close behind them. After a short while, the portal closed, and Gojo was left there all alone. Gojo had a way of knowing. Whatever was going on, this was something that required them. He could stay back and watch after things till they came home, and he knew that they were going to come home. Of course, Japan was a big area, so he couldn't afford to just not have any backup. But there was one student he could call. A student he hadn't seen in over a year. But he was someone who was very powerful. Someone who he knew he could rely on in a pinch. Off in the city of Chiba, there would be a young man. He was dressed ordinarily, to say the least. His hair was a bit messy. His eyes, they looked a bit dull. As he walked down a dark alleyway, he would corner the being he was looking for. It was a wrenching guard. On his forehead was the animal symbol, the symbol for the armadillo. It transformed into a monstrous animal beast, a member of the beast sect, if you will. The young man unsheathed his sword. He looked very disappointed. He was expecting more of a challenge. After all, if Daishi had really returned like they said, then his forces were going to need to do a lot better if they were really going to be a threat. Heck, even Grisaka was more of a challenge a year ago. But that's a story for another day. After he defeated the would-be animal monster, destroying it and scattering its ashes, he would hear clapping coming from behind him. It was an old friend. Gojo-sensei? Yuta, my man. You did that rather quickly, and you didn't even need to morph. I'm impressed. Well, there's no point in being all that flashy. I only morph when I need to, and yet you haven't done it in over a year. So, they're really just not that much of a challenge for you, eh? I wouldn't say that. It's just, I don't like to overcomplicate things, There's no point in being all flashy and morphing if the enemy is, well, that weak. Oh, I feel ya. So, what are you doing here, Sensei? I heard you got a new set of students. And one of them's Sukuna's vessel? Precisely, my friend. However, things have gotten a little complicated within the last, I don't know, half an hour. You see, Sukuna's vessel is no longer in this universe. Wait, what? Oh, well, you see, this weird portal thingy opened, and it seems as though a lot of rangers are being called to a specific location. You just let Sukuna's vessel leave? Why didn't you go with them? Because if I went away, this world would fall into chaos. I can't afford to leave. But he's not alone. I've sent the other 2 first years along with them as well. And your other classmates followed along, just in case. Wait, Maki, Panda, and Toge went with them also? Mm-hmm. Then who's watching after Tokyo right now? Oh, that's what I came to get you for. You see, even though Yuji's gone, and so is Sukuna's vessel, there are still other cursed spirits that we have to deal with, and there are the ever-growing animal spirits. It seems as though Connoisseur is now back in the world, along with Daishi's new vessel as well. So, I was wondering if you could maybe... You want me to help you watch after Tokyo while they're gone, don't you? Precisely. And what are you gonna do if they don't come back? Well, I have the utmost confidence that they'll be back. But even if they aren't, in the end, it's still a win-win in a way. Yuta looked at him as though he were speaking nonsense. But Gojo would explain. Don't get me wrong. I want all my students to come back safely. Don't mistake me on that. But I am looking at it realistically. If Yuji were to die somehow, that means that the fingers that he's already absorbed would die with him. It won't be a lot, it's only 4 at the moment, but still, that's 4 less fingers we have to deal with for the rest of our lives. Meaning that even if Sukuna were to find another vessel, he would never be as strong as he once was. Meaning, he'll forever be in a state of weakness. And don't you think that if Sukuna knows that, he's going to do everything in his power to make sure Yuji doesn't die? Because he has to get back to this world. Precisely. You see, I'm doing this on a bit of a gamble. Sukuna knows what's at stake, so that means he can't afford for Yuji to die now, especially with Daishi making a comeback, and with us not knowing if there will ever be another vessel like Yuji Itadori. I see. That actually makes a lot of sense, Sensei. And besides, if worse comes to worse, we still have our ace in the hole. Gojo would point to the golden morpher on Yuta's side. The golden dragon that would rise again. You think? Oh, it'll happen in time. I believe one day you'll use that morpher. Trust and believe. We all will. Gojo and Yuta would make their way out of the alley, heading over to Tokyo. Until the others got back, they were going to have to watch over the city as best they could. Of course, for someone like Yuta, taking care of the whole city of Tokyo, that was no problem at all. Although he did wonder about this Yuji Itadora, the Red Jungle Fury Ranger, wondering if their paths would ever cross. The paths of the dragon and the tiger. Meanwhile, Yuji and the others would now be in the midst of a battlefield. They weren't sure of what was going on or what was happening, but if they didn't know any better, it looked like there were pirates and marines fighting on all sides. Gunshots, cannon fire, and a guy made out of lava were all fighting everywhere and anywhere at once. There was a really big buff looking dude with a white mustache who was shaking the ground everywhere. Some guy with blue fire wings. Another guy that seemed to be made out of light. Another guy made out of ice. A guy made out of smoke, and everywhere and everyone and everything in between. But amongst everything, Yuji saw what he had sensed. There was a young man running ahead of all of them. A young man with a straw hat. He was rushing forward to the main front of the battle. You see, Yuji Itadori and the Jungle Fury Rangers had been summoned to the Battle of Marine Ford. But they were not the only Rangers there as well. Before their trip into the multiverse can begin, there was only one objective right now: saving Ace. This concludes Jujutsu Kaisen Curse of Daishi, based on the Heroes of the Morphing Grid series, Part 5. As always, if you're a fan of today's video and everything else that we have to offer, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is PowerCore Productions and Podcasting that has to come out now and in the future. Stay tuned for tomorrow's videos as we're going to be doing a double upload, wrapping up parts 2 and 3 of Demon Slayer Dark Fury, What If Tanjiro Had Venom, Season 2, Parts 2 and 3. So make sure you stay tuned for those videos when they release. But anyway, that's going to do it for the end of today's video. I'm Javon Harrington with PowerCore Productions and Podcastings, signing off, and I'll see you next time.